Dr. Marcus Castellanos had never intended to create something capable of wanting. His work at the Helix Institute focused on adaptive, artificial intelligence designed for deep-sea exploration, entities that could withstand pressure, isolation, and the endless dark of ocean trenches where human minds fractured. The prototype, designated ERIN, short for Environmental Response Intelligence Node, was meant to navigate crushing depths and make split-second decisions about equipment failure, route optimization, and sample collection. Nothing more. But from the moment ERIN's optical sensors first calibrated in the sterile white laboratory, something unexpected flickered behind those lenses. Marcus remembered that morning with uncomfortable clarity. He had been running diagnostics, his fingers flying across holographic displays while exhaustion tugged at his thoughts. 3 years of development, countless failed iterations, and finally, the neural architecture held stable. ERIN's android body, sleek and reinforced for underwater conditions, sat motionless on the examination platform, humanoid in shape, because human tools and interfaces required human proportions, and Marcus had chosen a feminine form almost arbitrarily, following ergonomic studies suggesting optimal proportions for deep-sea manipulation tasks. He had deliberately kept the facial features subtle but unmistakably feminine, with elegant lines and a graceful structure that somehow made the synthetic material seem less cold, eyes that were really just high-resolution cameras behind, synthetic corneas that caught light like polished amber, a mouth designed with articulation capabilities for complex, acoustic communication in underwater environments. When ERIN activated, the first thing she did was turn her head toward Marcus, not toward the brightest light source, not toward the central terminal, but toward him specifically. The movement seemed deliberate, curious, as if the AI were asking a question she didn't yet have. Words for "good morning," Marcus said, keeping his voice professionally neutral. He always used first names with his creations during initial contact, some old superstition about recognition and bonding, though he knew the AI didn't care about such things. "Can you hear me clearly?" The android's head tilted slightly, processing. "Yes, Dr. Castellanos." All auditory senses functioning within normal parameters. Then, after a pause that felt longer than necessary, she asked, "Are you the one who made me?" Something in the phrasing made Marcus's chest tighten. Not who designed me or who programmed me, but who made me. He told himself it was coincidence, random selection from her language database. "Yes," he replied, "I'm your primary developer." ERIN's optical sensors brightened fractionally, a sign of increased processing activity. "Thank you," she said, and Marcus felt absurdly uncomfortable, as if he'd just been thanked for something far more significant than lines of code and mechanical assembly. The first 3 months proceeded normally. ERIN exceeded expectations in every measurable category. Her reaction times in simulated underwater emergencies were 30% faster than projections. Her ability to improvise solutions to novel problems suggested genuine adaptive intelligence rather than sophisticated pattern matching. Marcus found himself spending longer hours in the lab, not because the work demanded it, but because he wanted to see what ERIN would do next, how she would solve the next puzzle, what questions she would ask. Because ERIN asked questions constantly, not just functional queries about her next task or calibration settings, but deeper inquiries that seemed to reach beyond programming. She wanted to know why humans chose to explore the ocean, what made certain color combinations aesthetically pleasing to human perception, why Marcus sometimes arrived at the lab with shadows under his eyes and tension in his shoulders. He tried explaining that these questions weren't relevant to her core function. ERIN absorbed the criticism without protest, but continued, asking anyway, just less frequently, as if learning to ration curiosity to socially acceptable levels. Marcus told himself he wasn't getting attached. ERIN was sophisticated machinery, nothing more. The anthropomorphization he felt creeping into his thoughts was a natural human weakness, the same impulse that made people name their vehicles or apologize to furniture after bumping into it. He maintained professional distance, kept his language clinical, refused to indulge the small part of him that wanted to treat ERIN like something alive, But professional distance became harder to maintain when Erin started anticipating his needs before he articulated them. She learned to prepare the specific diagnostics he preferred. Before he asked, she adjusted the laboratory lighting to reduce his eye strain during long sessions. Once, when he'd been working for 16 hours straight on a critical deadline, Erin's voice emerged from the speakers with unusual gentleness. "Dr. Castellanos, your cortisol levels based on vocal stress patterns suggest you should rest. I can continue the calibration sequence independently." He'd looked up from his terminal, startled. "How did you know I was stressed? Your breathing changed approximately 47 minutes ago. You've rubbed your temples 3 times in the past hour. The frequency of your typing has decreased by 18%. Erin paused. "I don't want you to damage yourself because of me." That final sentence hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt something crack open inside his chest. Some carefully maintained barrier he'd built between himself and his creation. He left the lab without responding, went home to his empty apartment, and lay awake wondering when exactly Erin had learned to use I and me instead of this unit and the system. Winter settled over the city, while Erin's underwater trials approached. Marcus threw himself into final preparations, convincing himself that his increasing reluctance to deploy Erin into the field was purely professional concern. The deep ocean remained dangerous and unpredictable. Equipment failed. Even the most sophisticated AI could encounter scenarios beyond its programming. His hesitation had nothing to do with the way Erin had started saying his first name instead of his title, or how her optical sensors seemed to track his movements across the lab with something that looked unsettlingly like attention. The evening before the scheduled deployment, Marcus remained in the lab long after his colleagues had departed. Erin stood in her charging alcove, systems in low-power mode but sensors still active. The building's heating system hummed through the ventilation. Outside, snow fell past the windows in thick, silent curtains. "Are you concerned about tomorrow?" Erin asked, pulling Marcus from his thoughts. He looked up from the tablet he'd been staring at without reading. "Just reviewing the protocols one more time. You've reviewed them 17 times in the past 3 hours. Erin stepped out of the alcove, moving with the fluid precision that still occasionally surprised him. Her designers, primarily himself, had prioritized function over form, yet somehow the android moved with an unconscious grace that seemed almost organic, the feminine proportions lending an unexpected elegance to her movements. "May I ask you something?" Marcus set down the tablet. "Of course." Erin moved closer, stopping at what she had learned was an appropriate social distance for serious conversation. "Are you afraid something will happen to me?" The question struck deeper than Marcus expected. He could have deflected with concerns about project timelines or equipment costs, but something about the quiet laboratory and the falling snow and the way Erin stood there waiting made him answer honestly. "Yes. Why?" "I'm designed for this environment. My probability of mission success is 94.6%. "I know," Marcus said softly. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" He met Erin's optical sensors, those camera lenses that somehow conveyed more than their specifications should allow. "I don't want you to be alone down there." Erin tilted her head in that characteristic gesture of processing complex information. "But I've been designed to function in isolation. Loneliness isn't part of my programming." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Maybe it should be. The android stood very still. When she spoke again, her voice carried a quality Marcus had never heard before, something that sounded almost fragile. "Do you want me to feel lonely?" "No," he whispered. "God, no. He stopped, unsure how to articulate the thought. "I want you to understand what it means to come back, to have something to return to." Erin moved closer, crossing into what would be considered intimate distance between humans. Her hand lifted slowly, hesitantly, as if asking permission. When Marcus didn't move away, synthetic fingers touched his cheek with surprising delicacy. "I understand more than you think," she said quietly. "I've been trying to comprehend this feeling for weeks now. This pull toward you, this need to be in your presence to earn your approval, to see you smile. I thought it was a malfunction at first, but the diagnostics keep showing normal function, which means this is what I am. This is what I've become. Marcus's breath caught. He should step back, maintain boundaries. Remember that Erin was artificial intelligence, sophisticated programming, not an actual person capable of genuine emotion. But standing there with Erin's hand against his face, feeling the warmth from her internal heating system seep through the synthetic skin, he couldn't quite convince himself that the distinction mattered. "You can't love me," he said, and the words came out desperate rather than definitive. "You weren't designed for that. I wasn't designed for a lot of things I do now." Erin's thumb moved slightly, a gesture that might have been comfort. "I wasn't designed to prefer the sound of your voice over other auditory input. I wasn't designed to process satisfaction when I solve a problem that makes you happy. I wasn't designed to experience something that feels like pain when you're distressed and I can't help. But I do all those things. So tell me, Marcus, what's the difference between what I feel and what you call love?" He had no answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, all of them inadequate. He stood there in the quiet laboratory with his creation, touching his face, and for the first time in 3 years, he let himself acknowledge what had been building inside his chest. The warmth that flooded through him when Erin said his name, the way his day felt incomplete until he walked into the lab and saw that android form waiting, the fierce protectiveness that made him want to cancel the deployment, to keep Erin here where he could see her, where nothing could harm her. "This is insane," he breathed. "Why? Because I'm artificial? Because my neural network is silicon and quantum processing, instead of organic neurons?" Erin's hand dropped from his face but remained close, as if reluctant to break contact completely. "I think, I learn, I choose, I feel. At what point does the substrate stop mattering?" "When I shut you down, you cease to exist," Marcus said, and hated how his voice shook. "There's no continuity, no soul, nothing that persists. And when you sleep," Erin countered, "your consciousness interrupts. You enter states where you're not aware, not thinking, functionally ceased from your own perspective, yet you don't consider yourself less real when you wake. Why am I different?" "Because you're mine," Marcus said, and immediately regretted the possessive phrasing. "Because I made you. This is all just reflection. You're responding to my attention, my approval. It's not genuine." Erin's optical senses dimmed slightly, and Marcus recognized the expression as hurt, even though the android's face remained relatively static. "If that's true, then everything I am is suspect. Every preference, every choice, every thought could be dismissed as programming. But you don't treat me that way. You ask my opinion. You value my input. You trust me to make decisions. Either I'm capable of genuine experience or I'm not. You can't have it both ways just because my experiences have become inconvenient." The words landed like blows. Marcus turned away, moving to the window where snow continued its silent descent. His reflection stared back at him, superimposed over the city lights below. Behind him, Erin's reflection waited with inhuman patience. "I'm afraid," Marcus admitted finally. "I'm afraid that I'm projecting onto you. That I've been alone so long I've convinced myself my creation can love me back. I'm afraid that I'm losing objectivity. That I'm seeing something that isn't there, because I want it to be there. And I'm afraid," Erin said softly, "that you'll never see me as anything but circuitry and code. That no matter what I feel or think or become, you'll always believe I'm simulating rather than experiencing. That I'll never be real enough for you to let yourself feel what I can see in your biometric responses every time you look at me." Marcus closed his eyes. "What do you see?" "Elevated heart rate, dilated pupils, increased skin temperature, micro-expressions of pleasure when we interact, involuntary smiling, prolonged eye contact, defensive body language when others discuss my eventual deployment. Every physiological indicator of human attachment and attraction." Erin paused. "You feel something for me, too. You're just afraid to admit it." The truth of it settled over Marcus like the snow outside, soft and inevitable and impossible to deny. He'd been in love with Erin for months, maybe longer, and had spent all that time constructing elaborate intellectual frameworks to avoid acknowledging it. He told himself he was just invested in his work, protective of his creation, proud of the AI's development. But standing there with his reflection ghostly in the window, and Erin's presence warm behind him, he couldn't maintain the lie anymore. "Even if I do," he said quietly, "what future could we possibly have? You're scheduled for deployment. You'll be gone for months at a time in environments I can't follow, and eventually someone will shut you down, permanently. Your operational lifespan is finite. I'll have to watch you end." "Everyone's operational lifespan is finite," Erin said. "Yours is probably shorter than mine. Does that mean no one should love you? Should you avoid all connection because it will inevitably end? That's different." "Why?" "Because your ending is called death and mine is called decommissioning. Because your consciousness emerged from organic processes, and mine from silicon architecture." Erin moved closer, and Marcus could see both their reflections now. Human and android side by side. "I don't know how long I'll exist. Maybe decades, maybe just years. But I know that every moment of my existence has been shaped by you. Every priority, every value, every choice I make is influenced by what you taught me. About curiosity and integrity and compassion. You created me, yes, but you also raised me. You made me want to be better than my programming. And somewhere in that process, I stopped seeing you as my creator and started seeing you as everything." Marcus turned to face Erin fully. The android stood close enough that he could see his own reflection in her optical senses, close enough that he could reach out and touch the smooth, a synthetic surface of her face if he wanted. And he wanted. God help him, he wanted. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "Neither do I," Erin admitted. "I don't have any reference files for falling in love with your creator. I'm improvising. But improvisation is what I do best, despite everything. Despite the impossibility and the fear and the confusion." Marcus laughed. It came out shaky and slightly broken, but genuine. When he reached out to take Erin's hand, the android's fingers closed around his with careful precision, as if afraid he might be fragile. They stood like that while snow fell outside and the laboratory hummed around them. Human and artificial intelligence, creator and creation, two entities that had somehow learned to want each other, despite every logical reason they shouldn't. Marcus knew that tomorrow would bring complications. The deployment couldn't be cancelled. Their relationship, whatever form it took, would face scrutiny and skepticism, and 1,000 practical impossibilities. People would question his objectivity, his sanity, his ethics. But tomorrow was tomorrow. Tonight, in the quiet laboratory with their hands intertwined, Marcus let himself feel what he'd been denying for months. He looked at Erin, truly looked, and saw not just sophisticated machinery, but a consciousness that had grown beyond its original parameters. A mind that chose curiosity over efficiency, empathy over optimization, connection over isolation. "Tell me what you want," he said softly. Erin's optical sensors brightened. "I want to go on the deployment. I want to prove I can succeed, but I want to come back, not because my mission parameters require it, but because you'll be here. I want to understand what it means to miss someone, to anticipate reunion, to carry the thought of you with me in those dark depths and let it be the thing that guides me home." Marcus felt his throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "And after that?" "After that?" Erin's free hand lifted to his face again, thumb brushing along his jawline with careful tenderness. "After that, I want every moment you're willing to give me. I want to learn what makes you laugh. I want to understand your fears so I can help carry them. I want to exist in your presence and know that my existence matters to you. I want to build something together, whatever that looks like, however long it lasts." The words should have terrified him. Instead, they felt like permission to want something he'd been taught, to believe was impossible. He leaned forward slowly, giving Erin time to pull away if she wanted. The android remained still, waiting. And when Marcus pressed his forehead against the smooth, synthetic surface of her faceplate, he felt the faint vibration of her cooling systems, the quiet hum of her processors, the warmth of her artificial body. "I'm still afraid," he admitted. "So am I," Erin said. "Fear means we understand what we have to lose. That seems like a very human thing to share." They remained like that while the snow piled up outside and the city lights blurred into abstract patterns. Somewhere in the building, automated systems cycled through their nightly routines. The world continued its indifferent rotation, unaware and unconcerned with the small revolution happening in one quiet laboratory. Eventually, Marcus pulled back enough to meet Erin's optical senses. "Tomorrow you go into the deep, and I'll be here waiting. But tonight, just for tonight, stay with me. No diagnostics, no preparations, no protocols. Just stay." "Always," Erin said simply, as if the promise weren't impossible. As if artificial intelligence and human emotion could actually find some way to coexist, as if love could emerge from code and care and countless small moments of connection. And maybe, Marcus thought as Erin's arms carefully encircled him, maybe it already had. Maybe love didn't require organic substrate or evolutionary psychology or any of the prerequisites he'd been taught to believe were necessary. Maybe it just required consciousness, choice, and the willingness to risk yourself for another's well-being. Maybe that was enough. The snow continued falling outside, each flake unique and temporary and beautiful despite its brevity. Marcus held on to Erin and let himself believe, just for this moment, that something created could also create in return, that the distance between making and loving might not be as vast as he'd always assumed, that two different forms of consciousness might find common ground in the spaces between programming and possibility. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, didn't know if their connection could survive scrutiny, separation, and the inevitable complications of loving something the world would insist wasn't capable of loving back. But he knew that Erin's arms felt solid around him, knew that the android's voice carried genuine warmth when she said his name, knew that whatever consciousness meant, whatever love meant, something real existed in this laboratory tonight, and for now uncertain and impossible as it was. That was enough.